In this video, we're going to be discussing variables, assignments, and statements in R. On the previous notebook video, we saw how we could use the interpreter like a calculator to evaluate expressions and get results. In this section, we're going to discuss how to create variables so that we can store those results and reuse them at a later time. Variables, or names, are sequences of one or more alphanumeric characters that are used to represent or store values in R. We've already seen a few examples of storing values using variables, and later in this notebook, we will actually cover variable assignment in a little more detail. And so just to refresh your memory, we can assign a value to a variable using an assignment operator. For example, we can assign 0 to the variable x as follows: x, left arrow, 0, and now the variable x contains the value 0. When creating variable names, we actually have a lot of freedom. However, there are a few rules to follow. First, a variable name must consist of alphanumeric characters, and the set of alphanumeric characters that R supports will depend on the country in which you're working and the OS that you're using. And it's because of this, to keep your code portable, it's recommended that you use only the characters A through Z, both upper and lowercase, the digits 0 through 9, as well as the underscore and period characters. Also, R is case sensitive. To demonstrate this, if I write A arrow 1 and then output A, you'll see that we have the value 1 for A. If I were to do the same thing but use an uppercase A and say capital A arrow 2 and then output capital A, you'll see that now capital A has value 2, as we would expect. And if I again output lowercase a, we see it still has the value 1. This means that R is case sensitive, and these are in fact two different variables. Now I point this out because typically frowned upon to have variable names that differ only by case, because it becomes very difficult to keep track of which variable contains which values. So if you have variable names that are close to one another, it's recommended that you modify them in some way other than just case. The next rule is that every variable name must begin with either a letter or the period character. So we cannot use digits or the underscore character to start our variable names. So if I typed underscore invalid underscore var and assign the value 3 to it, you'll see that we get an error. And this tells us that we can't start our variable names with the underscore character. We can use the underscore character in our variable names, just not as the first character. So if I were to type my underscore var and assign the value 4, you'll see that this actually does work. We can also use the period character within our variable names. So I can type this is a valid name with dots in the middle, assign the value 5, and this works just fine. Unlike underscores, we can start variable names with the dot character. So I can type dot another dot var, assign the value 6, and this also works. However, if you do start a variable name with the dot character, the second character in the variable name must not be a digit. It must be a character. Also, I should point out that all variable names that start with a dot character are hidden variables. And I'll say a few more words about this when we get to the ls and objects functions towards the end of the notebook. Now, since we can start a variable name with the dot character, and variable names are required to be at least one character long, we can actually create a variable name that consists only of the dot character. And so you see here we can assign the value 7 and even output this. But it's recommended that you do not do this, as it can make things very difficult to read and understand in your code. Before moving on, I do want to point out that the variable names used in these examples were constructed merely to describe the naming rules in R. And it is typically recommended that the names you use for variables have some meaning, or provide some additional context for how those variables are going to be used or the data they contain. And so in the next section, you will see that I've given you a few links to some style guides. These style guides should give you some recommendations on not only how to name your variables, but also on how to keep your code organized and easy to maintain. Now, there's one more rule regarding variable names that we have not discussed yet, and that's with regards to reserved keywords. R has a set of reserved keywords, and you can see these words by typing help reserved. The help pane will come up and display for us the set of keywords in R that are reserved and should not be used as variable names. These keywords have special meaning for the interpreter and will affect its behavior, so attempting to use them as variable names will only cause problems in the code.